Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Kavinsky's Tutorials. Today I'm looking at Bram Bos's Rozeta Suite, which is a collection of 10 apps. So you buy this thing, you get 10 apps for the price of one, 10 MIDI apps. This is an extremely useful collection of apps. So I got 3 copies of these to give away in today's video. So today I'm going to cover 5 of the apps. I'm going to give away 3 copies to subscribers to the channel in 2 days from now. Look at the pinned comment at the top of the YouTube comment section for details. And then when I bring out my second video on the other 5 apps, I'll also give away 3 codes. So look out for that. That will come out soon after this video, probably a few days later, a week later max, something like that. So thanks to Bram for providing those. So what I'm going to do here is first I'm just going to describe and let you hear very quickly what a couple of these can do, just to give you an idea for those of you who are not familiar with these. Second, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the history of these apps, because this is really a very important kind of historic collection of apps in iOS music history, really. And I got a few interesting little details from Bram Bos when I was chatting to him earlier today about this, which I'd like to share with you. Maybe some people will, especially people who are hardcore Audio Bus forum people from a few years ago when these apps first came out, will know these things, but maybe some others will not. I think it's pretty interesting. And then I'll let you kind of hear a few of these working together, and then I'll go through and explain in detail how to use each of these 5 apps. And I think this is really going to be a useful video for a lot of people, because first of all, a lot of people do not really understand how to set up MIDI apps in a host like AUM. Secondly, there is actually no proper manual for these. So yeah, I think a lot of people have these apps and bought them already but don't really know how to use them. So you watch these 2 videos, you'll know by the end how to use all of these apps. I think it'll be very useful. Now, let's see then what we have here. First, let's start with this drum machine. So first thing I want to mention is that even though this is a drum sequencer from, so not a drum machine, it's a drum sequencer, okay? It doesn't, all of these are just MIDI, they don't produce any audio. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to route the MIDI from this into this instance of, what's the correct pronunciation of this? Rausmaker, yeah, Rausmaker. It means noisemaker in Dutch, Rausmaker. So gonna route it into this drum machine. But first I just want to actually route it into this instance of Ting, because I want to remind you that although there's going to be a bit of an electronic flavor to what I'm doing here, it doesn't have to be used for that. You know, you can use these kind of apps for making a lot of different kinds of music if you use them creatively. So let me just show you first of all. So we can go in here, and this has different channels. Let me just click these ones as well. Let me press generate. Okay, now it's starting to play these sample sounds in Ting. Now, just to mention, we can go in, we can take down the velocity here. Right, so it's a bit less electronic. We can use these mutation buttons to make the patterns more varied. These are kind of like randomization. Right, so just wanted to mention that first. because I don't want people to initially get the impression, okay, these are just for people who like sort of electronic music, techno or whatever. No, you could use these apps in countless creative ways. You just have to get a little bit familiar with them first, experiment with them. The world of MIDI is so rich, you can do so much incredible stuff with all of this. But let's just hear it on, yeah, a more traditional drum machine sound. So first let's initialize the patch again. Well, let me let you hear actually, just with the bass line. Let you hear a few of these together, just briefly. Okay, let's generate a bass line. Let's make it longer, 16 steps. Let's put some shuffle on it. Let's put shuffle on the drums as well. Cool. This is a bit obnoxious, isn't it? I think one of those is more than enough. In fact, I think I'll just get rid of that clap altogether. Okay. Let's hear the Arpeggiator. Arpeggiator is going into this instance of SynthMaster. You hear particles. It's going into an instance of I-fretless brass. And that's going through Yokowa delay. Okay, let's take these off for a second. Okay, so first let me just talk about the history of these. So they're all going to be found, right, as audio apps because they predate the development of the MIDI audio unit in Apple. So these were complete pioneers. So we find them in the audio section, not in the MIDI section where we would normally expect to find MIDI apps like these. Because Bram Bos was the pioneer of these apps. He created these before there was even the Apple standard for MIDI audio units. So what Bram told me was that basically MIDI, the capacity for iOS to do this only became available in iOS 11, but it was not something that was really explicitly developed. It was initially, MIDI capacity of iOS was initially just developed for synths to send out MIDI. So what he did was, I think based on just very little information that they had, there was no real proper documentation. I think he said it was something they had to figure this out based on a slide from the WWDC, the developers conference from 2016. Had to kind of try to reverse engineer from that and figure out how to do this. So one problem was that if you want to develop a new type of app, which these kind of apps that just produced MIDI didn't produce audio, this was a completely new thing that Bram developed, first person to develop this. But if you're developing a new type of app, you need a host that can host those type of apps. So he got in touch with Jonathan, the developer of AUM, which is of course the host that I use in all my videos and what I'm using today. Wonderful app. I'm going to make some videos on this soon, by the way. So we got in touch with Jonathan, and so Jonathan helped to develop the ability for AUM to actually host these kind of apps, and then Bram worked on actually building these MIDI apps. And so initially there were just a few of these, and then he kind of built it up into the current size of 10 different apps. And he mentioned, by the way, that some of these apps were very heavily inspired by different ideas that people in the audio bus community had. And this is also one of the reasons why these apps don't have a proper manual. So they kind of came out sort of one by one, and there was a lot of discussion about them at that time in the audio bus community, which if you're not familiar with it, you should definitely check out AudioB.us, the main forum for iOS music makers. So he felt that because there was a lot of buzz about these at the time, and I mean, if you look back on the threads in the forum about these apps, I mean, people were just like, this is just like manna from heaven or something, you know? I mean, it was such a revolutionary thing for the iOS music making community at the time. So he didn't really feel there was a need for manuals, but there is a need for manuals. And so really a lot of people will have these apps, but will not be using them. So yeah, I mean, I was using some of these apps before, and some of them I wasn't really using. And it was good for me to make this video because it forced me to really get clear on a couple of things that I wasn't clear on in some of these apps and get some information out of Bram. So anyway, let's get stuck in here. So we'll start with the bassline. First looking, right, so we're routing, noise is receiving MIDI from Rozeta bassline over here, okay? So we can change our key and scale. Just change and press generate. But let's keep it to what it was. I had a minor pentatonic. Okay, we can do things like, let's see. Look, if we click here, we can create ties. And listen to how that changes the sound. You hear how now we've got these staccato notes? And when we click these, we've got bends. So we can do things like that. We can add accents, so it'll have louder velocity. We can just remove notes entirely. If we drag here, we can change the note. But of course, then you might go out of scale. You could always use Scalar to force those. I'll talk about that later. Right, so a lot you can do here. So this is a very important button, generate button. So a lot of the time what you can do is just go through and just keep pressing generate until you find something you like. And then you can tweak it. So, I mean, you can tweak things like the shuffle, for example. I'll just put it back to 19. It's going to fit in with other things. Here we can do mutation. So we can increase the likelihood of changes in the note order, or accented notes, or slides. here we're getting subtle changes there. Okay, here we can move everything left, move everything right, move things up, move things down. You see how the note values are changing there? We can make things jump octaves, which if some of the notes get pushed up, then they're going to appear down here in the lower octave. I guess this represents 3-octave range. Okay, so here we have different patterns, and we can use these copy and paste buttons to set up different patterns, or we can just generate the patterns on their own. We can use MIDI as well to transpose or trigger pattern changes. Let me show you how to do that. This is one of the things that wouldn't be too obvious to everybody. Okay, so see here, MIDI transpose, the octaves around C4 can do this. Okay, so let's see. What I'm going to do is use the AUM keyboard. So click here, right? Now AUM's keyboard is going to send MIDI into it. And let's see. Let's let you hear that maybe. Okay, we will just use it here, yeah. Do you hear how that's transposing? Let me turn off the latch. Right, so we can do transposing like that. We can use MIDI to trigger pattern changes. So let's just set up, for example, another different pattern here in step 2, pattern 2. Okay, let's just let's do, say, third one. Let's do the third one as just a major major pentatonic. Generate. Okay. So let's look again here. So MIDI trigger patterns. So C1, D1, E1, right? So C1 will trigger pattern 1, D1 will trigger pattern 2, E1, pattern 3, and so on. Let's try that now. Okay, let's look at bassline. We should get these patterns changing here. Maybe I got to click out of this or something. Well, let me press this again. Did I not? I didn't click it. Okay, yeah. MIDI triggers patterns. Okay. You see how it's jumped to pattern 2? So yeah, this is really cool. This is really cool. So you can basically you can kind of set up song modes, and you could use other sequencers and things to send notes in here to trigger those things. For example, just off the top of my head, you could use something like step bud, for example, to trigger these patterns. Okay, you can shift the bass note by octaves here. Right, so that is the bassline one. Now let's look at XOX. And let me just see what it's on here. Pattern 1. Okay, let's just keep it on pattern 1. All right. So, XOX. Take off the bassline for a second. Now, in it, at any time, we'll initialize the patch again. So, let's, again, we have, look, same thing. I'm not going to explain it again every time, so we can set up different patterns. Again, you know, same. We can feed MIDI in here to trigger changes in those patterns. We have a thing in here, simulate 808 timing. So the 808 had a kind of distinctive sort of push-pull feel to the rhythms that this can simulate. So that's an important setting in here. We've got that one on at the moment. Let's again look at randomizing here. So let's say first just generate bass and snare drum. Let's add in the clap. Now again, remembering we can go in at any time and manually change these, right? So it doesn't have to be completely random. Same with the bass, we can go in, we can change all those things ourselves. So we can take these as starting points. So again, if you like something, then deselect it before you go and randomize something else. Okay, I like those. Let's just do high tom. Okay, pretty cool. Let's play with the mutation. You hear how that's very different? And here it's just a little bit different. Now I won't play with the velocity because for this kind of sound, it's better that it's very robotic. So you might not want to get everything mutating, right? Because I mean, it's important with drums that it's pretty predictable. So you can choose at any one time, maybe one or two things that you allow to mutate. Okay, when this is selected, we're here. All of these will be the bass drum sequence. Now these are the snare drum sequences, clap, the toms, and so on. Let's try adding a few things. You can see when we press here, it's off, it's on, and now it's accented, so here it has more velocity. Now this is very important. So here we can have different templates, different MIDI templates for different drum machines. So here we've got Rousemaker, Noir, General MIDI, blah, 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 Axon, Elastic Drums, you know. So there are a lot of iOS drum machines and stuff that are already in here. But if they're not, you can just set up your own by just changing these manually. And then you can save it in your host and just give it, you know, the name of that drum machine or whatever that is not in the lists here, and just save an AUM, right? So you can save like that. So that's an important one. Velocity levels, okay, so again you can just set up a slight amount of variation. can change the channel for the MIDI output and so on and so on. Okay, so that's Rozeta XOX. A couple of other things actually. Let's just get it minimal. Generate again. I'm going to bring down the velocity of a couple of these. Yeah, so shuffle here, etc., etc. Okay, pattern lengths and so on. Time signatures. How many steps? Now, loop sync. This one's important. So, let's see what happens. What happens when loop sync is on? When this bar, when the transport comes back to the start, it's going to go back to the first beat here. Do you see the way that's working? But if we put it on, if we put loop sync off, it's just going to do these kind of polyrhythms. So that loop sync is quite an important button. Okay, Arpeggiator. So with an Arpeggiator, remember that we need to give it MIDI input. Okay, so let's use the AUM keyboard and let's bring this in again. Okay. Ah, that's too low. Let's go up. So why I put Scalar in here is that let's say we have selected in Bassline the scale. You know, let's say you're just playing around here and you find a scale that sounds good, but let's say you don't really know much about music theory and you don't know what notes are in that scale. Well, I mean, you could go and check online, but another thing you could do is literally, if you're routing the MIDI from the ARP into Scalar, and then you're routing the MIDI from Scalar into your synth, and then in Scalar, you set up C minor pentatonic. Now, if we choose here, quantize up, what'll happen is, if I put in any notes, it doesn't matter what I put in, it's gonna fit them into the scale. And if there's a note that is out of scale, it's going to push it up to the next note that is included in the scale. Or we can quantize down, or we can just reject the out of scale notes, which will give us fewer notes in our melody. So let's listen to how that all works. So the notes in this scale, right, just for the sake of illustration, it has C, it's got an E flat, an F, a G, and a B flat, right? But say you didn't know that. Wouldn't really matter as long as you're going through Scalar. We can just put in anything here. And it's never going to go out of scale. So Scalar is is a really, really useful app, actually. Really useful app when you're dealing with MIDI. I'll maybe go into some more uses of it in the next video. I don't want to make this one too long, this intro one. It's really an incredibly useful app. Other things we can do, we can transpose our input. While keeping it in scale. So we can use this to get variations in our melody without going out of scale. And then if we want to go out of scale, we can transpose the output. Because sometimes it's cool to go out of scale if you do it in the right way. Okay. The velocity thing was not triggered. Yeah, I don't usually use this one actually. So here we're quantizing all the velocity. Now everything's just going to be maximum velocity. Okay, let's look at the ARP itself. Let's bring our speed down. So let's bring in a few more notes. Okay, first of all, we can change the clock division. So we can speed it up or slow it down. We can make this pattern go up more octaves. So what it'll do is, for example, let's just do up here, okay? It's going to go up all these notes. Mutation is on. Okay, wait. Let me bring it down to 1 octave. One, two, three, 4, 5. It's going up each time there. If I put it to 2 octaves, what it's going to do is it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it's going to run the same pattern, but it's going to start up here. So it's going to go bam, 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 and then it's going to go from here and repeat that pattern. And the same if we do the 3 octaves one, it'll go up another octave. Okay, again, we can add in our shuffle. What shuffle is doing is it will make the first 16th note, for example, longer, and the second 16th note shorter. Third one longer, next one shorter, like that. Okay, mutate will bring in a certain amount of randomness. Bring down the octaves. You see, it's no longer just going up. This is the velocity of the unaccented notes. This is the velocity of the accented notes. And this is this is the interval between the accented notes. let's bring this one down so we can hear this very clearly. You hear how these accents are coming in sooner? Okay, let's bring mutate down. So let's look at a down pattern, up and down, random, double up, double down, okay, so that's the ARP. Now, particles. Okay, this one's pretty cool. It's going through Scalar here, but it doesn't actually need to. So we can set up scale here. So here we have these particles represent different notes that are floating around and won't make sound unless they hit the left or the right side. Now, we can increase the density. And that's one way of making sure that there's more likelihood of notes hitting the side, right? I mean, if we only have a few notes like this traveling at this speed, we're going to get note-on events very rarely. Like this, we'll get more. Here we can change the pitch. And the speed. I love this. The spread of the notes, right? So here we've got low notes, here we've got high notes. For example, if we put a low spread value and a high pitch value, you can hear what that's like. Let's increase the spread. Okay, so we can play around with those. We have a minimum and maximum velocity range, minimum and maximum note range. So we want it to go even higher. Oh, there we go. We're getting crazy high. That's pretty cool, actually. It's like an Irish tin whistle. Okay, quantize. Haha. So we can have really, that's going to be very random. Gate length. So here we'll have sustained sounds And here we'll have something very percussive. This is like sounds with very short decay or no sustain. This kind of thing is really cool to process with another app. So there we go with our look at 5 of the apps from the Rozeta Suite, and in the next video I will look at the next 5. Thank you for watching, everybody. I hope you found this useful. If you think there's anything important that I didn't mention, let me know. If you have any questions, write in the comments. And don't forget, if you're watching this in the first 2 days of release, make sure you look at the pinned comment at the top of the YouTube comment section for details of how to have a chance to win a copy of this beautiful suite of 10 apps. A truly legendary, very, very important piece of pioneering iOS app development by Bram Bos there. Okay, everyone, thank you for watching. See you in the next video. Take it easy.